Before Sarah, I had this belief about relationships. Love should be easy. If it's the right person, everything will just fall into place. I didn't expect to struggle, didn't think I'd ever have doubts. I figured if I worked hard enough, if I was just a good guy, things would work out. I also believed I wasn't enough, at least not in the ways that counted. I thought if I just had more money, more success, then I'd be the man I needed to be. But deep down, I was afraid I wasn't good enough for someone like Sarah. I kept trying to show her I was worthy, but it never felt like it was enough. And I never realized that the real problem wasn't her. It was the belief that I had to be someone I wasn't. I was in my early 30s when I met Sarah. At first, I wasn't looking for anything serious, just a connection. But when we started talking, something clicked. She was smart, driven, and had this energy that pulled me in. I didn't know it then, but meeting her would change everything. Our first date was effortless, like we'd known each other forever. We laughed, we shared stories, and by the end of the night, I knew I wanted to see her again. I had never felt that kind of spark before. Over time, we became inseparable. She was my best friend, my confidant. I started to believe that maybe this was it. This was the relationship I'd been waiting for. But I didn't know that I had a lot of my own issues I needed to work through. I thought love would just make everything fall into place, but life had other plans. That evening, Sarah and I sat in silence, the tension between us growing with every passing minute. She was staring at her phone, and I could tell something was off. We had been drifting for a while, but tonight it felt different. I finally broke the silence, my voice shaky. "Sarah, what's going on? Why are we even still doing this? I don't think this is working anymore." She didn't look at me, but I saw her shoulders tighten. "Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm tired of waiting for things to change that never do." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. "I'm sorry," I whispered, though I didn't even know what I was apologizing for. "I know I've been distant, but I don't know how to fix it. I don't even know what we're trying to fix anymore." There was a long pause before she finally looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't think we can fix it. I think we've been broken for a while, Jim. And it's not just you. It's me too." In that moment, it felt like the weight of everything finally crushed down on us both. I wanted to reach out, to say something, anything, but I knew there was nothing left to say. She stood up slowly. "I think it's time we let go." And just like that, the relationship I thought was solid and unbreakable shattered. The love was still there, but so was the pain. We both knew it was over, but neither of us could bring ourselves to walk away. Until we finally did. The days after Sarah left were a blur. At first, it felt like I was walking through life in slow motion, like everything was muted. It was strange how quickly the silence set in. The apartment, once filled with laughter and easy conversation, now felt empty, hollow. I didn't know what to do with myself. I told myself I made the right choice. I convinced myself that I had set her free, that I had done the selfless thing, that I was giving her the chance to build the life she deserved. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about Sarah. It was about me, too. For the first few days, I threw myself into work. I focused on the mundane stuff, meetings, emails, the little tasks that kept me busy. It helped distract me from the gnawing emptiness I felt. But the thing about emptiness is that it's always there, waiting for the moment when you let your guard down. And when I did, it hit me like a freight train. I missed her. God, I missed her. I missed the way she teased me, the way she laughed at my bad jokes, the way she'd reach across the table to hold my hand like nothing else in the world mattered. I missed the way she made me feel alive, like maybe I was worth something after all. I spent a lot of nights lying awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what I'd done. I couldn't stop playing our last conversation over and over in my head. The look on her face when I told her to go. The sadness in her eyes mixed with a strange sense of relief. She had wanted me to fight for her, to fight for us. But I didn't. I just let her go. I kept telling myself I did it because I loved her. Because I wanted her to have everything she deserved. But then I started to question myself. Did I really love her? Or was I just so terrified of losing her that I pushed her away before she could leave me? The truth was, I didn't know who I was anymore. Without Sarah, I felt lost. I had spent so many years telling myself that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't worth the effort, that I'd never be the man someone like her would want. And now, without her, I had no idea who I was. I had no one to prove myself to. I had nothing left but my own fears and doubts. And then one night, after another long day at work, I sat down on the couch, exhausted from all the mental noise. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I came across a picture of Sarah and me from that weekend trip we took to the lake, our first real getaway. We were laughing, both of us, caught in a moment of pure joy. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I wasn't just missing her, I was missing myself. I had spent so long believing that I wasn't enough, that I couldn't live up to the expectations of someone as amazing as Sarah, that I had forgotten who I was at all. I had let my fears and insecurities shape every decision, and now, they had shaped the loss of someone I truly cared about. It was at that moment that I realized the truth. I wasn't the problem. My fears, my insecurities, my belief that I wasn't good enough, that was the problem. Not Sarah. Not our relationship. Me. I started to see it clearly now. Sarah didn't leave because of who I was, or because I wasn't good enough. She left because I couldn't see my own worth. I had been holding myself back from the very thing I wanted most, the chance to build something real with her. But instead of fighting for us, I let fear dictate my actions. I let fear control the narrative, and in doing so, I pushed her away. It was a painful realization, but it was also freeing. For the first time in a long time, I could see the road ahead. I knew I had to change, not for her, but for myself. I had to learn to see my own worth, to believe that I deserved happiness, that I deserved love. And until I could do that, I wasn't going to be able to be the kind of man Sarah needed, or the kind of man I wanted to be. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. But for the first time, I felt like I had a choice. I didn't have to stay stuck in the past. I didn't have to be the guy who always doubted himself. I could choose to change, and maybe, just maybe, I could become the man who could love and be loved the right way, someone who believed in himself enough to stop holding back. It's funny how time works. At first, I didn't know how I'd get through the days without Sarah. The silence felt like it was swallowing me whole. I'd wake up each morning with this heavy feeling, like I was still carrying the weight of everything that had happened. Every little thing reminded me of her, the way the coffee smelled in the morning, the way she'd always leave a note for me if she was going somewhere. It was like I couldn't escape her, even though she was gone. I tried to distract myself. Work, friends, even hobbies I'd neglected for years. I filled my days with noise, hoping it would drown out the emptiness. But the truth is, I didn't want to fill the silence with distractions. I wanted to fill it with clarity. I wanted to figure out why I kept running from my own happiness. Why I couldn't just believe in myself. Why I couldn't see that I was worthy of a love like Sarah's. I started spending more time alone, really reflecting on everything, the relationship, the breakup, the choices I made, and the ones I didn't. I realized something that I hadn't been willing to admit before. I had spent so much time thinking I wasn't enough for Sarah that I forgot to think about whether I was enough for myself. That was the turning point. I had been looking for validation outside of myself, waiting for someone else to tell me I was worth it. But I didn't need someone else to do that. I needed to do it for myself. I needed to stop measuring my worth against other people's standards and start believing that I had value, even if I didn't have everything figured out. I had been living in a constant state of fear and insecurity. Fear that I'd never be enough for anyone. Fear that I'd always fall short. Fear that I'd never live up to the person I wanted to be. And that fear had kept me stuck. It had stopped me from taking risks, from going after the things I really wanted in life, including Sarah. But now, I was starting to realize that fear wasn't a reason to give up. It was a reason to fight. Fight for my own happiness. Fight for the life I wanted to build. It wasn't about changing who I was. It was about embracing the parts of me that I'd been running from for so long. The parts that were worthy of love, worthy of success, worthy of happiness. I began taking small steps. I went to the gym more, not to try and impress anyone, but because I knew I needed to feel better about myself. I started setting goals for myself, not based on what anyone else expected of me, but on what I actually wanted. I stopped comparing my journey to everyone else's and started walking my own path. But the hardest part was facing the emotional baggage I had been carrying for years. The feeling that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't worthy of a love like Sarah's. I kept asking myself, why did I push her away? What was I afraid of? And slowly, the answer started to emerge. I was afraid of vulnerability. Afraid that if I let myself truly love someone, I'd be opening myself up to all the hurt and disappointment I'd been avoiding my whole life. I had always told myself that love meant being strong, being perfect, being everything for someone else. But that wasn't love. Love, real love, was about showing up, even when you weren't perfect. It was about being vulnerable, being honest, and trusting that you were enough, even when you didn't have everything figured out. I realized that I wasn't just afraid of losing Sarah. I was afraid of losing myself in the process. But now, I understood that to truly love someone, I had to first learn to love myself. I had to believe that I was worthy of love, no matter what. I had to stop letting my fears decide my future, and that's when I knew I needed to make a change. I wasn't going to let my past define me. I wasn't going to let fear control my future. And most importantly, I wasn't going to keep hiding from the one thing that could make me whole, love. Whether that was with Sarah or someone else, I wasn't going to keep running from it. The hardest part about loving someone isn't just giving them your heart, it's giving yourself the permission to be loved, even when you're not perfect. And I was ready to let myself be loved. I'd been on this journey for a while now. Slowly but surely, I was starting to feel like I was getting my life back on track. I was still working through a lot of my own issues, believing in myself, learning to love myself, and letting go of the fears that had held me back for so long. But I was getting there. I could feel the change inside me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally becoming the person I wanted to be. I wasn't thinking about Sarah anymore. Not in the same way, at least. I had come to terms with everything. I had let go of the past, accepted that things had ended, and had started focusing on the present and the future. It felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But life, as it always does, had a way of surprising me when I least expected it. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was in the middle of a meeting at work when my phone buzzed. I glanced at it quickly, seeing Sarah's name on the screen. For a second I froze. My heart did that weird, jolt-y thing it always did when I thought of her. It had been months since we last talked, and I hadn't expected to hear from her again. But there it was. I couldn't ignore it. I excused myself from the meeting and stepped outside to take the call. "Hello?" I said, my voice suddenly tight. "Jim?" Sarah's voice came through the phone, soft but clear. There was a slight hesitation in her tone, like she wasn't sure how I was going to respond. "It's me, Sarah." I swallowed, trying to collect myself. "Sarah. Hey, it's good to hear from you." There was a pause, and then she spoke again, her words hesitant but warm. "I didn't know if you'd pick up. I've been thinking about you a lot. About us. I know things ended badly. And I guess I just wanted to check in, to see how you were doing." I hadn't expected this. I didn't know what to say. A part of me had convinced myself that she had moved on completely, that I was a chapter in her past, but hearing her voice made me realize how much I had missed the connection we shared. "I'm doing okay," I replied, my voice steady but unsure. "Better, actually. I've been working on myself, trying to figure things out. You know, making some changes." I could hear her smile through the phone, even though I couldn't see her. "I'm really glad to hear that, Jim. I've been doing some thinking, too. And I guess I just wanted to say I'm sorry for the way everything ended. I know I left without giving you much of a chance to say what you needed to say." And for that, I'm sorry. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I had never really considered that she might be feeling regret too. I thought I was the only one dealing with the aftermath, the only one who had doubts about how things ended. But hearing her say she was sorry made me realize that, deep down, we both had our reasons for what happened. We both had our fears and our mistakes. I didn't exactly make it easy for you either, I said, my voice softening. I pushed you away, Sarah. I let my fears get the best of me. I kept telling myself I wasn't enough, and that messed everything up. But I'm starting to see that it wasn't just about you. It was about me. I wasn't ready to be the person I needed to be. There was silence on the other end of the line. And then, slowly, she spoke again, her voice thick with emotion. I know, Jim. And I think I understand that now. We both had a lot of growing to do, and maybe we still do. But I think we both needed this time apart to figure out who we really are. I didn't know where this conversation was going, but I could feel something shifting, something changing between us. There was no immediate promise of reconciliation, no quick fix to everything that had happened. But there was understanding. There was forgiveness. And that felt like a miracle. I think I've learned that I can't keep running from the things that scare me, I said, my words slow and deliberate. And I think we both learned that we need to be honest with ourselves, and with each other, about who we are and what we really want. We both fell quiet for a moment, letting the weight of what we'd said settle between us. The old hurt, the confusion, the pain from the breakup, it was still there. But it didn't feel as heavy anymore. It felt like we had finally crossed the bridge from the past to the present, and we were standing on solid ground. I think we've both come a long way, Sarah said, her voice softer now, full of a kind of peace. And maybe we'll see where that takes us. But for now, I just wanted you to know that I'm proud of you. And I'm glad you're doing well. I'm proud of you too, I said, the words feeling real and true. Take care of yourself, Sarah. And thanks for calling. It meant more than you know. We ended the call soon after, but it didn't feel final. It didn't feel like a goodbye. It felt like a new beginning, even if we weren't sure where it would lead. We were both different people now, people who had learned from their mistakes, people who had grown, and that was enough. It's funny how life works. You think you have everything figured out, then something, or someone, comes along to remind you that you don't. That call with Sarah was like a wake-up call for me. It wasn't a sudden decision to dive back into a relationship with her, but it was a turning point. It made me realize just how much I had been holding on to the past, and how much I had yet to learn about myself. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I didn't speak every day. In fact, we didn't even talk that often. But there was this unspoken understanding between us. We were both in different places now, both on different paths. And while I still loved her, I knew that I couldn't just fall back into the same patterns I'd been in before. It wouldn't be fair to either of us. For the first time, I was truly starting to focus on me, not in a selfish way, but in a way that allowed me to heal. I threw myself into personal projects, things I had always put on the back burner: painting, writing, learning new skills. I started seeing a therapist, not because I was broken, but because I knew there were things inside me that I needed to confront. Things that I couldn't just ignore if I wanted to be the best version of myself. And Sarah? Well, I kept up with her through social media and the occasional text. She was thriving in New York, settling into her new life, doing exactly what she had always dreamed of. It made me proud of her. Honestly. To see her succeeding, to see her finally become the woman she had always wanted to be, it was inspiring. But it also helped me realize something important. I wasn't waiting around for her to come back. I was finally starting to live my life, too. There was a particular morning, a Saturday, when I was sitting at the coffee shop with my journal, writing down my thoughts for the day, when I got a text from Sarah. It wasn't a long message, but it was enough to make me smile. Hey Jim, I've been thinking about you lately. I know things didn't work out between us, but I just wanted to say I'm proud of the changes you've made. You're becoming the person I always knew you could be. Keep going. Those words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how much I still valued her opinion until that moment. I had spent so much time feeling like I wasn't good enough for her, that I never stopped to think that she might be proud of me too. It was a small moment, but it gave me something important: closure. It gave me the permission to move forward, to let go of the past completely. As the months went on, I started to get more and more comfortable with where I was in life. I wasn't looking for validation from others anymore. I wasn't waiting for someone to tell me I was good enough. I had learned to validate myself, to stand on my own 2 feet, to be content with who I was. And then, one evening, out of nowhere, I received another message from Sarah. This time, it was a little longer, a little more personal. "Jim, I know we've both been through a lot these past few months. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about us. About what happened, and what could have been. I don't know where life is going to take me, but I feel like we both have some unfinished business. Not in a rush or anything. Just, let's meet up soon. I think we both deserve a chance to really talk and see where we are now." I sat with that message for a while. I didn't rush to respond. I didn't feel any pressure. Part of me was tempted to say yes right away, but I knew that this wasn't about rekindling something for the sake of it. It was about two people who had both grown, who had both done their own work, and who were now at a place where they could truly meet each other again, not as the people we once were, but as the people we had become. So, I replied with a simple, honest message. "I'd like that. Let's find a time to catch up." It wasn't a promise of anything more than two people reconnecting, but it felt like the right thing to do. We had both learned so much about ourselves, about each other, and about what it meant to love and to be loved. This wasn't about fixing what had broken, but rather seeing if there was something worth building from the ground up. And that's the thing I've come to understand: sometimes, the people we love aren't meant to stay with us forever. But that doesn't mean their impact on our lives is any less significant. Sarah taught me more than I ever thought I could learn from a relationship. She taught me to believe in myself, to stop running from my fears, to understand that love is about vulnerability and trust, not perfection. And now, as we stood on the brink of something new, I wasn't afraid. Whatever happened next, I knew I was ready. I had spent enough time running from myself. But now I was facing forward, walking into whatever future lay ahead, whether that meant a life with Sarah or a future of my own making. Either way, I was ready. And I was no longer afraid to embrace it. It had been months since Sarah and I last spoke, but that day, when we finally decided to meet up, felt like both a new chapter and a closing of an old one. We agreed on a quiet cafe, the kind of place we used to go to on lazy afternoons when the world seemed to slow down just enough for us to catch our breath. I showed up a little early, sitting by the window, watching people pass by. There was something about the stillness of the moment that made everything feel different. I wasn't nervous, not anymore. I knew this wasn't about rekindling the relationship we once had. It was about understanding each other better, about seeing who we were now, after all the growth, the heartache, the lessons. And in a strange way, I had the sense that whatever happened, I would be okay. We both would. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked different, she looked just like Sarah, but because there was this new energy about her. There was peace in her face, a calmness that hadn't been there before. She was no longer the woman who was always unsure of herself, always waiting for the next thing to fall apart. She had her own center now, her own sense of self. And it made me smile. "Hey," she said, her voice soft, but there was no awkwardness in it. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time, the same way I was seeing her. "Hey," I said, standing up to hug her. It wasn't the tight, desperate hug we used to share. It was different now, gentle, warm, respectful. As if we had both learned to respect the space we needed to be ourselves. We sat down, and for a while, there wasn't much to say. We just sipped our coffee and took in the familiarity of the moment. I think we both needed time to process how much had changed, how far we had come. Then Sarah spoke, breaking the silence. "You know, Jim, I've been thinking a lot about what you said that night on the phone. About how you weren't the man you needed to be. But the thing is, I think you were always that man. You just didn't know it yet. I blinked, not expecting that. I was? She nodded, looking down at her coffee cup. Yeah. I think part of the reason things didn't work out between us before was because we were both waiting for the other person to change. But we couldn't. We had to do the work ourselves. I felt a lump rise in my throat. She was right. I had spent so much time trying to change for her, trying to be what I thought she wanted, that I forgot to just be who I was, flaws, fears, and all. And in the process, I lost sight of what I needed, what I wanted, and the man I was becoming. I've learned that, too, I said, my voice steady but thick with emotion. That it wasn't about becoming someone else to make you happy. It was about learning how to be happy with who I am. And I think I'm finally getting there. She smiled softly. I'm proud of you, Jim. You really have changed. And not just for me, or because of me. You did it for yourself. That's the best thing you can do. We sat in comfortable silence again, both reflecting on what had been said. And in that quiet moment, I realized that the person I was sitting across from wasn't the same Sarah I had broken up with months ago. She was someone who had gone on her own journey, who had learned her own lessons, and who had found her own sense of peace. Just like me. So, what happens now? I asked, after a while. Do we go back to being friends? Or? Sarah looked at me, her eyes searching my face. I don't know, she said honestly. But I think we both need to stop thinking about what was and focus on what is. We're not the same people anymore, and maybe we're not supposed to be. But I think we can be part of each other's lives again, in whatever way that makes sense. I nodded. That felt like the truth. We didn't need to rush anything. We didn't need to force something that wasn't there. What mattered now was that we both understood that love wasn't about holding on tightly. It was about letting go when the time was right and trusting that whatever happens will happen in its own time. Yeah, I said, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. I think we've both learned that life doesn't always follow the path we expect, but it's still worth it. We don't have to have all the answers right now. She smiled again, that same warm, genuine smile. No, we don't. But I think that's okay. We talked for a while longer, about our lives, our work, the things that had made us who we were now. There were no grand declarations, no promises of rekindling what we once had. There was just two people who had come full circle, who had learned what they needed to learn, who had grown in ways they hadn't expected. And for the first time, I felt a real peace between us, a mutual understanding. When we finally said goodbye, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel regret. I felt hopeful. There was no need for closure anymore. It wasn't about the past. It was about the present, the friendship we were building now, the mutual respect we had for each other, the knowledge that we had both learned the greatest lesson of all, to love ourselves first, so we could love others better. And as I walked away, I realized that the journey I had taken wasn't just about finding Sarah again. It was about finding me. The man I had become, the person I was always meant to be. And whatever the future held, I knew I was ready to face it, with or without her. Because in the end, I was finally enough for myself.